Well, firstly, I want to welcome the indications today of very good news which will provide greater sustainability for the Irish economy. The Central Bank and Credit Institutions Resolution Bill 2011 is one of the requirements of the EU IMF programme of financial support for Ireland. The measures in the bill include what is commonly known as a Special Resolution Regime, or SRR for short. This new legislation originates under the EU IMF bailout that was negotiated under the previous Fianna Fáil Green Party government, and in some ways it is a case of locking the stable door after the horse has bolted. But a special resolution regime is an important part of any modern economy's financial regulation. That is one reason why the government is proceeding with it, and I think it is telling that in the last 14 years of government, Fianna Fáil never legislated for one. Of course, another reason is that under the Memorandum of Understanding agreed by the Fianna Fáil government with the EU IMF, we have to proceed with legislation. And an SRR is intended to allow a more orderly resolution of failing banks and other financial institutions, including building societies and credit unions. And in this regard, I would point out that credit unions in particular have been very much hamstrung by the bailout regulations. The normal winding up procedures available to companies under the Companies Act are inadequate when it comes to institutions of this kind. And in the US, where over 140 banks have failed in the last year or so, the equivalent legislation has been much utilised. Britain hurriedly enacted measures in 2009 in the wake of the Northern Rock failure, and similar regimes are also being created at EU level. This legislation at last Ceann is intended to come into effect when the interim measures in the Credit Institutions Stabilisation Act 2010 lapses at the end of 2012. And when enacted, it will give the central bank powers to deal with financial institutions which are failing or likely to fail. The main powers are, firstly, to establish so-called bridge banks, to hold the assets and liabilities of failing institutions temporarily pending transfer to a third party. Secondly, to make a transfer order to a third party in respect of a failing institution, subject to prior notice to the institution concerned and the approval of the order by the High Court. If there is an imminent threat to the financial stability of the institution or of the financial system in the state, there is no obligation to notify the institution in advance. Thirdly, to make a special arrangement order whereby the central bank would take over the effective management of an institution that is failing. Again, subject to an imminent threat to financial stability, any such order would be on prior notice of the financial institution concerned and subject to the approval of the High Court. Under the legislation, the Minister for Finance also has powers to make financial incentives such as loans or guarantees available to any proposed acquirer of a financial institution. The Minister will also have powers in relation to the winding up of a financial institution, such as that nobody can appoint a liquidator without the central bank's approval. The Minister will have the power to direct a financial institution to prepare and implement a recovery plan, together with powers to prepare a resolution plan for that institution. This legislation, Las Ceann, serves to reinforce Ireland's commitment to resolve and restore confidence of the public and for greater transparency in the financial services sector. This is to be achieved through the process of open and transparent regulation, effective and efficient resolution regime for failing institutions, and the active process of deleveraging and downsizing some of the existing institutions in an orderly and transparent manner. The proposed changes and the commitment of the Central Bank and the Government to implement such changes will assist in remedying some of the disparities in the system and, with renewed confidence, lead these institutions into the next decade. I have criticised them previously and I will criticise them again because it must be repeated the previous Fianna Fáil Green Party administration left the Irish people with an awful legacy. This present administration is determined to leave Ireland and her people a better legacy during its term of office by getting on with fulfilling the EU IMF obligations, such as this legislation before the House today, and that the previous administration signed the state up to. Thank you, Ceann.